On June 3rd, 2017, Alex Honnold climbed El Capitan in Yosemite National Park. It's a 3,000-foot granite wall. Until the late 50s, climbing El Capitan was thought to be impossible. Over the next few decades, those who attempted the climb did so with teams, with ropes, with all kind of safety equipment, and they usually did it over 3 to 5 days with a lot of rest. Honnold did the climb free solo, which means he did it alone and with no safety rope. He accomplished this historic climb in just 3 hours and 56 minutes. While I hope you will never attempt a climb like this one, you will face plenty of metaphorical mountains. Genesis 22 records the harrowing story of Abraham being tested by God. At this point in his life, he was living his best life now. All life's difficulties and sacrifices seemed to be in his past, with nothing but a bright future ahead. Then God spoke, telling Abraham to sacrifice what he has spent his adult life fighting for and pursuing. Sometimes the word of the Lord disrupts our nice life. Sometimes the word of the Lord does not make logical sense. Sometimes the plan of God causes more pain than joy, at least in the short term. Abraham obeyed this impossible to understand word from God. Verse 6 says, Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife, so they went both of them together. And Isaac said to Abraham his father, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham responded, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. Now eventually they came to the top of the mountain. When they got there, Abraham built an altar. He arranged the wood on the altar. He bound Isaac and put him on the altar on top of the wood. Abraham was about to sacrifice his son when the angel of the Lord stopped him just at the last second. Genesis 22:1 tells us that this was all a test, that God tested Abraham. James 1 talks about the necessity of spiritual test. He says, Count it all joy, brothers, when you encounter various kinds of trials, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. There are two truths about spiritual test. Genesis 22 tells us that tests are from God. James 1 tells us that tests are for us. In 1997, after 10 years of research, Paul Stoltz concluded that IQ and EQ, or intelligence quotients and emotional quotients, were not the primary determinants of success. In his book, Adversity Quotient, Stoltz proposed that AQ, or adversity quotient, was a more accurate predictor of success than either IQ or EQ. IQ measures intelligence. EQ measures emotional intelligence. AQ measures human resilience. Stoltz's AQ metaphor is a mountain with three types of people: quitters, campers, and climbers. Think about the testing of your faith as a mountain or your own El Capitan. Matthew 16 describes this idea of mountain-moving faith, this idea of speaking to mountains and demanding that they get out of our way. But what happens if we speak to the mountain and it doesn't move? It doesn't jump into the sea. We can quit, we can camp right where we are, or we can climb the mountain. That's where we get the idea not just of mountain moving faith, but mountain climbing faith. Abraham refused to quit or camp. He kept climbing. When he got to the top, he found a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. And Abraham took that ram and offered it up instead of his son. So it says, Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. That place of God's provision is the place of obedience, the place of sacrifice, the Mount Moriah. Leaders don't quit or camp halfway. They climb. No matter how steep, no matter how dangerous, they climb. But we're not climbing El Capitan because we're not climbing free solo. We're climbing in a community. It's impossible to read this story in Genesis 22 and not look ahead 2,000 years to another father who put wood on his beloved son, who climbed another hill, Calvary, to actually sacrifice his innocent son for us. Because of the cross, we not only climb in community, but we climb in the presence of the Holy Spirit.